Hey everybody, welcome back to myRE360's Be Your Own General Contractor. My name is Adonis Lockett, and in this module, we're going to be discussing the process. We're actually going to dive into the details of the project management system, and we're going to talk to the granular level of creating a timeline and workflow for your subcontractors. So now when you walk into any project, the first thing you need to ask yourself, where do I start? What work should be done? What subcontractors do I need to bring in first, second, third, etc.? What is the order of work that should be done? What subcontractors can be at the house at the same time versus the ones that need to be involved in sequence? Do I need to register with the city as a general contractor, or do I need to pull any permits? And frankly, how do I manage all of this information? Where do I go and where do I put it? So the great thing is the myRE360 project management system has the solution for all of these questions. So jumping right into the myRE360 project management tool, this tool was developed to help systemize and streamline your project management operation for any project that you're going to be your own GC. The myRE360 project management tool is fully equipped with the Rehab Estimator. Now, the Rehab Estimator allows you to walk into any project and line by line identify everything that needs to be done in regards to a renovation. This means this will actually make sure that no task is overlooked and that there is not a single line item or subcontractor that is missed for your next project. It then has a pre-populated pre-purchase checklist. So once you walk your next project, identify where you're going to move forward with, this checklist allows you to do everything that you need to do leading up to the purchase of your deal. It includes sending your earnest money to title, reminders and outlines about where to send your option fee, do inspections, and get any other things done that are needed as part of leading up to the purchase of your next project. It also has a pre-populated post-closing checklist. You ever had a project where you've sold it and then a month later you got an electricity bill for $200? Most of us have if you've done a project. And it is the simplest things that are just simply forgotten that will end up costing you money. The myRE360 pre-populated post-closing checklist makes sure that when a project is done, you do everything you need to officially close out that deal. Now, the myRE360 Rehab tool is our most comprehensive and robust project management system in the industry today. It is a step-by-step guide on your project workflow. It has built-in task reminders. It allows you to manage your budget and expenses all in a single place. It'll tell you the technician or subcontractor type required for every single line item of work that needs to be done. And it even allows you to have calendar reminders for when a project or a line item should start and end. The myRE360 project management tool is your all-inclusive project management system that consists of everything that you need to efficiently and effectively manage your project. So let's jump into the step-by-step process of preparing for a project. Now, what we're going to do is talk through literally not only the step-by-step process, but the order in which each of these processes should occur. So pay close attention because in following this sequence, this was going to permit you from not omitting or forgetting anything to make sure that you've properly evaluated what is needed to successfully be your own GC and manage your project. So the first thing you want to do is clearly identify your exit strategy. I cannot stress the importance of this enough because this is going to be what determines when you walk into a project, whether you figure out what needs to be replaced or you look for what can be salvaged. And trust me, those are two completely different points of view when you're evaluating a rehab project. You want to fully evaluate the work that needs to be done. Now, in doing so, that will help you identify the necessary subcontractors needed for the job. Now, once you've identified what subcontractors are needed, you then want to confirm with those subs where in the project they'll come in. Are they going to be in the beginning, middle, or end part of your project? Once you identify what subs are needed and where in the process they're going to be involved, you need to actually create the project workflow of each of your subcontractors. Now, this is where it can get a little tricky because you're working to several people's availability and their schedule. So with that said, you're going to have to coordinate the start date and end date for each sub, because especially the subcontractors that have to work in sequence, you have to make sure you properly schedule one sub after the other. Once you've identified the subs, the workflow, and their start and end dates, you need to then go ahead and price out the material and the supplies that are needed. Let me take a moment and pause and make sure that you understand when you're dealing with your subcontractors, it is essential that you have the conversation on who's going to pay for the material. Are you expecting the subcontractor to pay for it, or are you going to provide that material as part of any pricing that you agree to? So once you've priced out and identified who's paying for the materials and the supplies needed, you then need to ultimately create your project budget and map out the pay schedule. Again, very, very important task, because if you're managing your own project and being your own GC, you're going to have to manage not only the cost of the material, but the pay to your subcontractors. Now, if you're using a hard money lender or a private loan in which you're getting money from your lender, it is important to make sure you have the conversation with these subcontractors on if their pay is susceptible to a lender draw. And again, as part of being your own general contractor, the expectation is for you to understand the lender draw process. And again, this is advanced education, so it's very important that you understand all of the different ways these subcontractors are typically used to working with general contractors and the way they expect to get paid. So if they're expecting to get paid every week or every other week, you want to make sure you properly budget and account for their requested pay schedule. You also want to plan for and account for any major project milestones. So what is very common is that when you're discussing compensation to your subcontractors, that will typically include the completion or achieving of a major milestone. For example, if you're dealing with your painters, you typically want to agree with your subcontractors or your painter in this example that they're going to be paid when the exterior, interior is completely done. Not a third, not halfway, not at 75% mark. You want to make sure that you guys both agree that you will not pay them until a certain milestone or degree of completion has been met. This is going to be important because in instances where your subcontractors are asking for compensation and a milestone is not met, this may adverse not only your budget, but also your project milestones and the budgeting that you've put in place for your particular deal. So please make sure that you have a clear conversation on the expectations of compensation and the pay schedule with your subcontractors. The next thing you need to do, and most importantly, beyond anything else, you need to get your contracts in place. So you need to make sure that whatever the agreement is with your subcontractor is actually done so in writing. That means you have to clearly spell out what their compensation is, when their pay is going to be, when their pay is not going to be, and any other things that may be considered as part of your agreement with that subcontractor. The reason why this is important is because if this is not clearly spelled out, this may be the reason why a subcontractor puts a lien on your project. So you want to have a clear understanding in writing about everything that's been discussed and agreed upon between your subcontractors. So we just went through a ton of information, so I want to recap. Number one, in this step-by-step process of preparing for your project, identify your exit strategy. Fully evaluate the work that needs to be done. Identify the necessary subs needed for the job. Confirm with your subcontractors where in the project they are set to start, and just as importantly, when they should be completed. You want to create a project workflow for each subcontractor or trade service that is needed. You then want to properly coordinate the start date and completion date of each subcontractor. Price out the material and supplies needed, and then make sure you confirm who's paying for those supplies, whether it be you as the general contractor or your subcontractors. Then create your project budget and map out your pay schedule for each subcontractor and for when you expect to have to purchase any material. Identify major project milestones for your subcontractors and for yourself as the project manager or general contractor. And finally, get your contracts, invoices, and documentation in place, confirmed and signed by all involved parties. This has been the step-by-step process to properly preparing for your next project. So now that you understand the step-by-step process, let's jump into some of the granular details of creating your timeline and workflow. Now, again, if you have 5 subcontractors, that means you have to deal with 5 personalities and 5 calendars. So it can become a very difficult task coordinating multiple people's schedule. So here are a few tips and tricks you should consider when trying to coordinate the workflow of your subcontractors. So the first thing you need to ask yourself is, how do I coordinate the order of each sub? So one thing I'm going to recommend is that you bring all of your subcontractors together at the project and then let them discuss what their function is, what needs to be done preceding their arrival, and what can be done after they leave. So instead of you guessing what needs to be done in the order it needs to be done in, bring all of your subcontractors out on a Saturday afternoon, and then one by one, let them explain, here's what needs to be done before I come in. And this way you can properly map out what needs to be done in what order. And in that conversation, you want to document a workflow that everyone has openly discussed and agreed to. So what that means, in this same conversation, you ask each subcontractor exactly what day and what time can you start, and what day and what time will you be complete. So this way, not only does that subcontractor have an obligation to you, they now have an obligation to a professional peer. So they'll clearly understand that them starting and completing their function will allow another subcontractor to start and complete theirs. Now, as a professional themselves, they will typically understand and respect the process. So this is allowing you and the subcontractor to present accountability to each other and their professional peers. In this same conversation, you want to ask each subcontractor, are there city permits and or inspections required? Because if one subcontractor is going to request a inspection or permit from the city, that may impact other subcontractors. So that's a conversation that you clearly want to have, and that is not sprung up on anyone in the 11th hour. So to recap, the best and easiest way to create a timeline and a workflow that all of your subcontractors agree to is document the start and end time for each subcontractor, and make sure you allocate a few days of buffer for material or incidentals. Allow the subcontractors to converse amongst themselves what their functions are, timeline, and when they can expect to start and finish. They'll also be able to discuss what other subcontractors can be in the project and which ones can work concurrent and which ones are required to be worked in sequence. So give your subcontractors the ability to communicate to all of the counterparts so everyone is on the same page about your timeline and your workflow. With that said, you should be ready to go, getting all documentation cleared, everyone signed, and everyone in agreement about the timeline and the workflow. So now that you've spoken to all of the subcontractors, had an open dialogue about the timeline and the workflow, in our recap, you want to ask yourself this: where do I start? You want to be mindful of a good project management system. And as we've just discussed, the myRE360 project management tool will allow you to manage a lot of your subs, workflow, timeline, and budget. You want to keep in mind the details of your step-by-step process needed to properly prepare for your project. And finally, make sure that your timeline is in agreement by all of your subcontractors, so this way your workflow is in proper sequence. You guys have been phenomenal, and I appreciate you joining me in this module. My name is Adonis Lockett. Make sure to hit the like button on this video. Follow me on social media at Adonis Lockett on Facebook and Instagram, and I will see you in the next module.